I need evidence of something. And I'm collecting this thought while I'm having it, so go with me here. I'm in the middle of doing something. I have been actively tracking the species, the humans, the human race, our evolution in communication just about ever since smartphones came out. Not literally, pretty soon after smartphones became really popular in like the late when did the iPhone come out? Like 04, 05, something like that. I got my first smartphone in 2011, I think. Social media, let's go farther back, of course, changed things, but when I started noticing and tracking the evolutionary burst, or having the theory of it, was when I was in college studying history at the University of Utah. And we talked a lot about, because my degree was called a history teaching degree. And so we went, rather than a specialty, like most historians, like if you're going to graduate and do like an actual historian job, you would have a specialty, you would have an emphasis, but for history teaching, you go breadth, not depth. Do you like my hair today? I don't know. I don't give a shit. She's doing her own thing anyway. So we had to have a shallower understanding, I guess, of specific events and things going on, but we had the breadth of history, as in I have studied and taught multiple years, over a decade. I have taught and studied all of human history, a little bit of everything, which makes my specialty kind of, my specialty is breadth. My specialty is broad scope, which, anyway, will the other historians let me into the club? Let me know. Anyway, and one thing we talked about a lot in the history teaching degree is teaching it, obviously, to kids and younger people and students generally, but, and what came up the most was for your classroom, for your curriculum, that you should design in the teaching classes, that you should design a curriculum that follows a theme, that ties the beginning of, because when you're teaching, let's say, world history to a classroom full of 10th graders, how do you get them to pay attention and understand the connections from the beginning of time? Kind of. I went all the way. I would use little videos to help them summarize the entire history of the world. There's a really good YouTube video I recommend. The history of the... How does it go? The history of the world, I guess. Anyway, it's a really good 7-minute-ish video that gives just like the very broadest of touch points throughout human evolution and development. What you notice when you have to connect such broad patterns of human behavior for so long, and with so much practice and emphasis on pattern tying together. What am I trying to say? Anyway, creating a theme to unite all of these. I subconsciously developed a theme through my studies and through my teaching of it, that humans evolve as a species, like physically evolve, like behaviorally evolve, culturally, anthropologically, whatever, evolve every time there is a communication advancement. So when we get an advancement in communication technology or structure or whatever, metacognition, the capacity to actually speak out loud the thoughts in your head that are more abstract rather than just communicating real versus real. It's like, there is a tiger over there. That's danger, that's real, that's present, that's now. There's food over there, that's tangible, right? Versus, I feel really sad because my mom died last year and she was like the person who made me who I am because I could have been. Those complex thoughts, studying and comprehending the function of our own behavior has been my that has been my hyperfixation for my entire life. And when I got into education at first as a working with autistic kids right out of high school, one-on-one in their homes, you learn very quickly to understand that communication is the function of so much of human behavior, and that communication is so much more than language. And so you get used to asking the question, what's the function of that behavior, right? And you start connecting that communication frustration causes a lot of violent reaction. You can look at the studies or whatever. You can do what I did for a job and know that when a kid got frustrated and wasn't getting what they wanted, they could reach out and actually hit me in the face. Happened more than once. I got bit in the knuckle once. He grabbed on real tight and I thought he was going to break the skin. He did not. I've been kicked and punched and pinched, and every single time that happened, it was because that kid had a need that wasn't being met, or thought that they had a need but needed to, redirect. It doesn't matter. They were trying to communicate and it came out in violence. And so every time we have an evolution in communication, we have an evolution in peaceful behavior, empathetic behavior, in being sweet to each other, and all that stuff. And so I noticed pretty early on in our smartphone era, I think, when cameras, when videos, when photos were not just easy to take, but also incredibly easy to share, that we were going through a communication evolution. And I believe I said it to my students in class more than once over the decade that I taught history specifically. My first decade was doing work in special education. My second decade was in teaching history and social science generally. Is that every time humans advance their ability to communicate, so look at the telegraph, for example. Let's just go back a couple hundred years. Everything happened faster. We evolved faster. Technology evolved faster. Our ability to share cultural important things like novels, like literature and poetry and fashion and art, like visual art, all that kind of stuff that was stagnant, well, not stagnant, that's not the right word, but would be trapped in isolation because you can't reach out far enough to engage with other communities to learn their techniques of creation and creative work and be inspired by each other, whatever. You introduce a method of just speaking and communicating and getting information out so quickly. All of the other technology advances, so all of a sudden it is now, not only are we speaking faster, but the telegraph got out faster than the train. But the train, so the railroad followed the telegraph lines. Isn't that interesting? Anyway, it doesn't matter. All of this is like, I'm saying I have a theory about how that was really chaotic, and I know that, but now you have a little idea of what goes on in my brain 24/7 and why I'm such an interesting person. But to me, all of that connects. Can you see the connections? I intend to write a book about it someday, but that as we evolve our capacity to reach each other, to teach each other, and to engage with each other's stories, each other's lives, and to see what each other is up to. And that is what made the cell phone era so significant. It's not just the telegraph, it's not just the train and the way that letters were being carried and people were being carried across distances so much faster, and steam engines in general, like ships, steam engines on ships, and that shares information faster because you have migration of humanity, and as humans migrate, they share stories and technology and information and blah, blah, blah. They're all connected. And before that, you had advancements. It's a little slower as it goes, but you had the printing press. You have advances in shipbuilding so that people and goods and information can be shared across continents for the first time. In a rapid way. It's not that, I mean, we were walking a lot in the continents that were connected, but the continents that were disconnected were just isolated, just only evolving what they needed in their environment and not being pushed to create more. And it's just like, the further back you go, the longer the gaps are between communication, evolution. So the closer we get, the shorter. It doesn't matter. And so my theory was, as our ability to communicate evolves, and this one is an explosion of communication technology, we have everything we are telepaths now. We can telepath. I am right now telepathing to you exactly what is in my head. I am a telepath, and even Chester understands me. Right? He does, but anyway. What I'm trying to say is, I predicted probably 15 years ago that as our communication exploded, so would our capacity to be good to each other. This is something I noticed in the Bible back when I was still a really good Christian. I still like Jesus, don't get me wrong. I love Jesus. He was a great example of revolution. And what I noticed about the pattern in the Bible, because you do study the Bible a bit in history degrees, okay, because the Bible is a good historic marker for a lot of anchor point for a lot of different things. Doesn't matter. What I noticed is God's punishments, however you take that, literal or not, coincided with our human species' capacity to be kinder to each other, less violent with each other, less violent to outside groups, but if you start in the very early phases of what the Bible records, which is way older than when the Bible was actually written, the things that it's trying to write about weren't written down till thousands of years after it would have supposedly happened. But anyway, oral history is the way we keep those stories going, so that's probably why it got so strange. But you see a pattern of humans being how do you put this? Survivalists focused 100% on survival and not being so good at being good to outsiders. And it's like, but we're all the same. We're all built the same. We are all the same. We all had this major weird genetic extinction event for some reason that, there was some kind of flood that wiped out all of humanity. There was something that wiped out almost all of the Homo sapiens. And we had to start over genetically from really small. And so we are really very all closely related. And we should all just get along. But anyway, what's interesting is that as we mass produced and evolved and spread out across the continents, we evolved slightly different genetic things to keep us healthy when we intermixed again. And here we are intermixing and doing so much better and living so much longer and having so much bigger brains and emotional intelligence. But anyway, all of that together, God, I really do talk strange. But anyway, that every time God's chosen people if you believe that or not, ran into issues of survival, they were blessed in their violence with success. But if they were violent outside of needs of survival, they were punished. There starts being, Hammurabi's Code, if you know about that, came before this. But it all says the same thing. If you hurt me, I get to hurt you back. So just don't hurt me and we will be fine. Mutually assured destruction keeps us all pretty copacetic, right? But that as God's people generationally evolve, the requirements get a little more stringent for being good, being nonviolent, being kind, being loving, being not liars, things like that. Every kind of generation, like major generational shift in the like Old Testament, I say generational, no, it was slower back then. We're always slower to change when we can't engage with each other. Collective learning is what makes us advance, not stagnation and isolation. But anyway, but that you notice that when you go through the Bible, the punishments get less directly violent, as in they're surviving better. Famine doesn't kill them as much. Floods don't kill them as much. Cities are thriving. People are doing better. They're living longer. Food sources are more plentiful and reliable. And so maybe God isn't punishing them as much. And so maybe they can just be cool, relax, and be friendlier with each other. And then you get up to the New Testament and you get this huge revolution in thought. When Jesus and other people like Jesus, because he wasn't the first and he wasn't the last and he wasn't the only, that wasn't the only continent it was happening on. But he says, love your neighbor as yourself, which indicates two very important things: that you should love people who aren't you and aren't your blood and aren't your bloodline, that you should put love out there to them too, and that you should love yourself. How revolutionary is that? Especially for the peons of evolutionarily colonized society where we used to be egalitarian and then we got trampled on by imperialists throughout. Anyway, that's another big long tangent, but you get this evolution in thought and communication and reaching each other, and we've been intermingling and intermixing, and this is a very cosmopolitan part of the world. If you know anything about Jerusalem, it is very connected to a lot of different cultures and communities. And thousands of years of history. So you have the perfect kind of melting pot for cognition, metacognition, and empathetic thought. And all of a sudden Jesus is like, hey, listen guys, I know this is crazy, but we could just not fight over resources. We could just actually share, get along, and be sweet to each other. Being sweet to each other is an actual option for life. And we don't have to have this violent undertone ever. Even with animals, even just we're gonna get there too. That's the next one, I think. And he died. He was killed. Because the revolutionary thought was too revolutionary, because those who maintain power over the majority, that very small minority, do so through violent thought. By controlling violent thought and other innately lizard brain, they call it lizard brain, but animalistic brain, human thought, versus our capacity to override our impulses in order to plan for future things that can be better. And Jesus and the other people who were like him were dangerous because of that. So you have, what was the communication evolution around the year 0? Jesus. What was going on then? I don't know. I have to look more in depth. There's a lot I don't know. But because I have this big overarching theme of patterns through communication evolution, every time we get sweeter, we get better at talking. Or every time we get better at talking, we get sweeter. I have the reason to go digging. But what I've also noticed specifically and have actively been tracking, especially over the last couple of years through social media, but just like in my own head and like trying to watch for things and patterns to, maybe write about someday, maybe just understand and tell you guys about it, whoever's listening to this someday, that we have become the sweetest, most cuddliest, most lovingest bunch of humans that has ever graced this planet, because as shitty as things are, and they are shitty, don't get me wrong, the shittiness is largely manufactured by the people who require our violent impulses in order to manipulate us. And if we are evolving past that, they no longer have that for control. So, and the reason I think these things, I will tell you right now, because as I have been watching us talk to each other and about each other for the last 15 years on social media, and yes, I have studied social media like an anthropologist, and yes, it is very valuable information, and if you think it's not, then you aren't a social scientist. But anyway, that we are not bullying each other as much on the internet. Are we still? Yes, but the vast majority of interactions I've been seeing on the internet this year have been supporting people who are being bullied and standing up for people in the comments has been happening so much more. And I try not to get myself, everybody's in an algorithm hole. But honestly, I make sure to engage pretty broadly in order to see what other groups that I don't like as much are doing too. But it's just a theory. And I've been creating hashtags to track certain things that I have theories about. And I intend to go back in 20 years from now to where I am, and I'm just hoping that everybody who says that anything you put on the internet is there forever, I'm counting on that, because this is going to be my the material I pull from. So hello 20 years from now, me, if you made it. I hope we made it. I hope we're there. I hope I'm talking to you now. Did we make it the way I thought we would? No spoilers. I won't say anything now, but you'll know what I'm talking about. Hashtag village economics. How'd that turn out? The women's revolution. I'm very hopeful for the species because I've been tracking the patterns for so long. I'm pretty sure I know how it turns out. Do you know what kind of art we're making now? Back to the present. Bye, future self. We'll talk again soon, probably. But you know how I know that we're doing better now? The type of TV you guys like to watch. It's difficult to get super, they don't have control over mass media like they used to anymore, right? It's hard to get, super TV events like we used to have in the 90s and early 2000s where everybody was watching the same thing. So it's a little bit more honest when something goes really, shall we say, viral. in entertainment. And the things that are trending highest, at least in the United States, I do try to keep track of global stuff, but I'm not going to pretend to know what's going on around the globe when I've never left the country. But in the United States, at least, the TV shows and movies that are most popular and trending highest are wholesome. And we've never really had that before. I don't know. And not in a false way. Not like Leave It to Beaver, where this was a wholesome like veneer over a really nasty reality. The things we are considering good entertainment today are much more honest in their representation of trauma and reality, and that we can have emotional intelligence and connection with the people in our lives, and we don't need violence anymore when our frustrations about our communications overwhelm us. We just got better at communicating, and when we don't know what to say, we know we can find out. We'll see if I'm right somehow. I'm putting this out there because I don't need anybody else to see it. I just need the evidence that I saw it coming, and I want to be fucking right. I think we're going to be okay. And it will not be overnight. It takes a very long time and a lot of martyrdom. Or it has in the past. And that part, that's not wholesome. Something about we need to see it sometimes. Well, people without imagination need to see things or experience things in order to learn about them being real. There's a lot of that right now. And there always has been. There never has not been an era of human history where we have not been shitty to each other. What I'm pointing out is that we are less shitty now than we have ever been. And that is what gives me hope. So, anyway. I have no idea what anyone would ever do with any of this information. This is mostly from me and my records, and just to say that this is my early notes from my dissertation for when I get my doctorate. I'm still percolating. Don't steal my ideas. Just kidding. I don't give a shit. This is collective learning. You take this idea and you run with it your direction, and I'll run with it in mine, and let's see if we meet somewhere in the middle, okay? I hope we're all right.